Okay, welcome back. So we're picking up where we left off on Chapter 3. So Chapter 3 talks about exploring Android Studio and the project structure on page 67. So they talk about a guided tour of the Android Studio. Now I'm just going to click on this guy. And you remember the first time we clicked on this guy, it popped up and said, hey man, what do you want to do? But because we already have a project in place, it's not going to ask us that. It's going to go directly to the project, which is a little strange because often I want to work on multiple projects at the same time. So this is kind of weird that it remembers the previous project. So on page 68, there's a goofy little diagram that we're going to look at that basically shows how all this stuff, whoop, that's not the right button. Here we go. So here's basically all the things that we need to be looking at. So section 1 is called the project window. And section 2 is obviously the editor. It could be an XML file, it could be a Java file, it could be the design view of an XML file. Remember all that? Good. Section 3, up here at the top, is the tabs. Like if you have multiple files open, that's great. And then 4 is how you switch between the... If I'm going to go ahead and bring this... I'm going to bring up something at the bottom, doesn't matter what it is. So they have a little doodad here that talks about a button down here that shows switching between the design and the text view. Ours is up here at the top. Things have changed a little bit. The status window, which is this thing down at the bottom, and then the tabs to select which one of the things you're looking at, like the profile or the logcat or things of that nature. Okay. So this is basically what we're supposed to see, and everything is kind of sort of like that except for the section number 4 is now over in the corner, but that's cool. Anyway, so that's the layout that we're going to use. I'm going to be collapsing the window number 5 a lot just because it takes up too much room in my perspective. Okay, so I'm going to start over in building another. Well, I tell you what, before we do that, no, let's go look at where this project is on your machine. Now, if you did it the way I asked, you'd go to Documents, and you'd have a folder called Android Studio Projects. Cool. And then the name of all the applications you've written so far. So normally this would be like a long list. So there it is, My Application. So if I double-click on that, and then there's a bunch of stuff. Now, I've got it so I can see hidden files and things of that nature. But there's a Gradle file and an ID file and all sorts of other stuff. I'm just going to ignore all that and hit App. Whoop, there we go. And then there's Build and Libs and a bunch of other junk. And again, all I want is the source one. And then a testing platform. No. I just want main. And now we're actually at, now that we've drilled down this far into our folder, okay? My Application, App, Source, Main. Now we actually got to the point that we are providing the files. All the rest of that is ephemeral stuff that the system needs and produces itself. This is the stuff that we write. Now, we're not finished drilling because as soon as I hit the Java thing, it's going to have that reverse URL thing. So that's this com, example, My Application, and finally we get to the Java file. If I click on the resources file, it's going to have all these things called drawable and layout and all these other kinds of things. We're going to get to those in just a moment. Okay, so let's just say, for example, way now, I mean, we're talking weeks and weeks and weeks from now, you're going to have to zip up a project and send it to me as a zip file. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to go to the entire thing, like if this was like the term project, do a right click and do send to compressed folder. Okay? Now that's a lot of stuff. I mean, this is not going to be a small file. Yeah, it's like 18 meg, or 13 meg rather. You'd have to rename it because you remember the file naming convention. This would be CIS4311, whatever this thing is, probably term project. And then whatever your name is, do.john. Okay? So that's how you go in and zip up a project to be able to send it. Now, that's not normally the way we do submissions of assignments until we get to the very, very end of the course. I just wanted to show that to you. Okay. So let's get back to here. And so on page 70, they say, hey, man, let's just start over. Well, first thing you have to do, if I want to start over, is I have to close the existing project to be able to start a new project. That kind of makes sense. So I'm going to go here to the file, and then it says close project. Boink. And now it brings you back to that familiar thing we saw before. Cool? Okay. So I'm going to start up, and I'm going to create me a new project. So here we go. New project. And I'm going to pick the empty activity again, the one we started with last time, the empty. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to call this one Chapter 3A for no particular reason. So now here I can put in all sorts of things. You know, I can do like uppercase, I can put in spaces. But notice that the package name is extraordinarily similar to the name of the application, but it's all in lowercase, and we'll talk about that again, I promise. And it is putting it in the right location, and it remembered my previous choice on the language. Instead of Kotlin, it's Java. That's good. So I'm just going to hit finish, and then wait, because that's how you have to do this. You just have to wait a minute. Now, obviously, this one won't take quite as long to do as the very first one we did. The very first one we did, the machine had to go get stuff, but here, you know, we don't have to go get stuff. Okay, one of the things I keep mentioning that you should do is to start the emulator first. So we're going to go to Tools, AVD Manager. We're going to click on the little arrow to start this guy up. And the reason I do that is many reasons. One is it takes a long time for this guy to come up. That's one reason. And the other is it cuts down on the chatter, because if you recall from our previous one, when we looked at the log cat while this thing is up and running, it's doing an awful lot of chatter, and I don't like to have that confuse me while I'm in the middle of writing an application. So I just start it up first, because if something doesn't work, I want to be able to ignore all the chatter, so to speak. Okay, so let me explain what I'm talking about on the chatter. So if I go here to logcat, there's a conversation going on. I mean, a long conversation going on, and I find that distracting. Okay, so let me just run the application to make sure it works, right? And you should get a little build grading thing, and then it should have a little green pop-up saying, hey man, we're done. Yeah, success. Which means if I pop on over to my emulator, then yay, there's my application. Okay, cool. So we've done this before, right? We kind of sort of know how that works. So I'm done now, and I want to stop the application. So I'm going to hit the red VCR button over there to make it stop. That kind of makes sense to me, right? So I'm going to go over here and go doink. And then if I switch back to this guy, then he's back to normal. Cool beans. Okay. So let's look at the folders inside of the studio. Not necessarily exactly the same folder structure. So let me bring this thing up to the front because that kind of annoys me. Okay, so if we look at the top level nodes, the top level node, one of them is called app, which is our stuff, and then one of them called Gradle scripts. So what the heck is Gradle? I mean, it sounds a little funky. Or our better question would be, why do we even need Gradle? Not what is it? So Gradle is a build management automation system. It's basically like a programming language if you really want to get to the nitty-gritty. It's something that automates the build. In other words, when you say, okay, you hit the green VCR button, it says, hang on a second, let me see what needs to be done. Oh, I need to compile this, I need to be able to link that, I need to be able to start this over, I need to be able to wipe this out, and all the rest of the things that it needs to do. So a Gradle script, I mean, we're not going to mess with the Gradle scripts until way into the semester. But anyway, so here's all the Gradle scripts that are there. That's fine. We're going to leave them exactly the way they are. If you want to look at one, like for example, we are going to be messing with one of these one day. So it's a different kind of language. It's not an XML file or anything like that. It's just one of those things. Anyway, so that's what that part is about. So what is Gradle? Well, it's a build management system. a build automation system. And why do we need it? Because when I click the VCR button, I want it to know, I want it to figure out what needs to be done, not me telling it, oh, well, wait, I have 5 Java files and only one of them needs to be compiled. I don't want to have to do that. Okay, cool. So let's look at the first folders under app. Well, there's manifest and Java and resources. I'm going to ignore the gray ones because the gray ones are, well, it's a concept that we're going to be talking about really soon, but those aren't real. Okay. They're pseudo folders. How's that? They don't represent something that's actually real in the system. Anyway, Java and Java generated and res generated. For this course, we're going to ignore the generated ones. Okay, just saying. So let's go look at this manifest thing. So under manifest, there's this thing. I'm just going to click on it to see what's inside. Okay, so it looks like the manifest is something that it talks about what the icon for the application is. Okay, what the title is. And then whether or not it supports right to left, because some languages don't do that. What the name of the activity is and what its intents are. And we're going to be talking about intents later, but an intent filter is basically like permissions. If, for example, I had put something in here that says, I need access to your contacts database, then that's sort of like a permission. When you install this app, the very first time it's going to come up and say, hey, this app requires the following things, do you accept? And you could look at it and go, no, I don't want anybody messing with my contacts. And you can just say no. So this is the one that lists all of the intents that this thing should have. Okay. So it really designates the minimum requirement for the device. In other words, you have to have this version of Android, and you have to, maybe it has, like if this was a mapping application, then most likely it would come up and say, hey man, the GPS thing is going to be required, that kind of stuff. So hardware features, OS features, and then permissions, basically. Plus it talks about, name and the version of your application, all the rest of that junk. Okay, so let's just look at an XML file in a little bit more detail. I'm going to look at the code view of this guy. So one more time, if you've ever had any exposure to XML, all XML tags start with an opening and end with a... Now sometimes there's a thing called a self-closing tag, like that. In other words, that is one opening tag, an opening tag. It starts and ends. This, because it ends with a backslash, this is considered a self-closing tag, which means that's it. What you see is what you get. There's not 2 parts to it. So where's the other part of this one? Well, they're nested. See, all the little indentation kind of helps. So since this one is not a self-closing tag, that means there's going to be a tag, a closing tag for Android X, constraint layout, blah, 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 blah. You can probably imagine it's going to be at the very bottom. Okay, that kind of makes sense? Okay, so XML files, it's fairly straightforward. If you want to convert one of these guys to a not self-closing, there's a technique that we'll show you here in just a moment. Okay, I'm going to switch back to the manifest one more time. And see this little thing where it has an at and a style and an app and a map? Isn't that cool? The at is a special thing. The at basically means it's sort of like a pseudo directory. Now, if we look into the resources, we can see a thing called mipmap. Okay, but there's lots and lots of things underneath it. It shows here IC Launcher and IC Launcher Round, which is the one that we're using. In reality, there's like umpteen gazillion of these things. So the at basically means I want you to go to this mipmap folder and pick the best one for me. So the at is like a pseudo directory. It's like, yes, I want to go to the mipmap directory, but I'm not going to tell you which one. I want you to figure it out on your own. And that's pretty doggone cool. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so you guys know how this works.